When people talk about breaking generational causes, they're actually talking about working miracles. We don't really realize the full impact of what the environment and the mentality of the people that we are surrounded by when we're growing up. We don't really understand how that impacts our mentality, our state of mind, our perspective on life, how we go about forging relationships, how we go about regarding the opposite sex. I grew up in a generation where most of the men ended up just bailing on the family situations. They got, my dad got my mom pregnant. Sweet talked her, got her pregnant. Once she had the kid, within a year and a half, he was out the door. He was gone. He was remarried by the time I was 3 or 4. And he would fly in occasionally for a Super Bowl or an inaugural ball. And, so the dad role model was out the window. And I'm a firm believer that when women are faced with the challenge of having to raise a boy into a man, most women, and this isn't a sexist remark, this is my personal experience and experience of other people, single moms often become overwhelmed with male energy, especially energy like mine that was very energetic, very hyper, running all over the place. It was a very, very challenging situation for women, especially women who just a couple of years prior were abandoned by the child's father. There's an undercurrent of resentment and hatred, because a lot of times what ends up happening with these women when the dad leaves is the family becomes unstable. The women end up, becoming alcoholic and rageful and unstable, and the environment just becomes very unstable, and becomes very isolated, and there becomes a kind of an unsaid, unspoken resentment and kind of spitefulness towards men in general. And I've spoken with some single moms, and there's an incredible amount of kickback that's happening right now. We have to understand that for a couple of thousand years on the planet, I don't know how long this has been going on. I guess as long as men have been more physically powerful than women. And women have had to be giving birth to children, so they carry these children and then they give birth to them. And a lot of women give birth into partnerships that are more like enslavements. There's been an incredible amount of abuse and maltreatment and lack of compromise and cooperation and respect and adoration. A lot of women give birth to kids and they're left with no choice but to have to saddle all that responsibility by themselves. And these are life-changing situations. I'm not saying that these children aren't the apple of most moms' eyes and they love them to death and they would never trade it back. But once you get thrust into a situation where you're a single parent and you're the primary care provider for another living being 24 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, that's an all-encompassing, overwhelming proposition. And a lot of single moms, they simply lose themselves. They wake up 10 years later and they say, who am I? Who was I? What was I going to do? And none of that even matters. It's totally irrelevant because their whole life becomes centered around raising this child by themselves. And so when my father left, that's kind of what happened with my mom. And it's challenging growing up in a environment with a mother and an older sister who both despised my father, and with a sister who never really met her father. Her father left when she was really early, so she has her own issues. So these women have these issues with men, and there's these issues with men. There's a lot of kickback with men, understandably so, right? But at the same point, society's set up in such a way, and there's rules that it seems like not very many people are able to follow and abide by. And a lot of times marriage and parenthood, like these shared nuclear family arrangements, they have a shelf life and they end up dissolving, or divorce happens, or all kinds of different stuff happens. So it's not necessarily the most natural thing for people to enter into. And a lot of times men just bail for a million different reasons. Sometimes the women bail and leave the dad. That happens too. But in the case of my experience, the father left, and I was left in an unstable situation with two female caretakers, both of whom carried deep-seated resentments towards my father and her own father. And so there was some experiences that happened, and that had an effect on me. And now the natural progression would be, when I become a father, I'm either going to bail on my kids, or I'm going to do things to disempower and bear down on my children so that they basically displace my bitterness and my anger towards my caretakers onto my children, if that makes sense. And I was doing that for a good portion of my life. I've had a lot of women who came into my life and tried to love me. I was not able to receive that love. I did all sorts of things to push that love away. I didn't trust women. The closer they got, the more they seemed like evil forces that needed to be pushed away. And so when I got these little girls, I have twins that are 7 now. When I got these little girls, it was very, very challenging for me, because here I am, I'm raised in a way that made me distrust and dislike women. I can say that. I had anger towards women for my upbringing. I was angry, you know what I mean? And so now I have these two little girls, and the only way that I can truly break the cycle is to heal my anger from the childhood I had in moments when, instead of reacting and bearing down and doing things to like break my kid's spirit, I would basically learn how to take in a lot of what was being presented to me and process it in such a way that I didn't break their spirit, and I allowed them to develop into strong, healthy women who were able to have healthy relationships, women who expected their fathers to be around, expected their partners to be around, expected to have relationships with men where they could trust them, and relationships where these men were able to see them in a certain way and to appreciate them and to respect them and to build like copacetic partnerships. But and so in a lot of ways, what my life has been around the last 7 years is healing these generational causes from my own family lineages by dissolving the hatred that I had for women through loving these little girls. And so these little girls can grow up not hating men. Do you understand? That's where the real breaking the cycle thing happens. And that's also happening that's the microcosm of this macrocosmic thing that's happening on the planet right now, where there's a shift in power, and there's a lot of backlash coming at men from women, and a lot of men are going into roles, and they are taking a lot of that, and they're letting that come at them. And instead of pushing back or trying to perpetuate the cycle of hatred or whatever, they're just doing these little demonstrations. They're demonstrating through their words and actions and the care that they're giving to their children, their sons and daughters. But that is being witnessed by single moms and single grandmas and different women around the planet that are witnessing these men honoring these roles and doing the little things on a daily basis that are needed, the heavy lifting, the meat and potatoes of child raising. And over time, we're like the collective miracle that's helping to bring balance, so that there's not this backlash of angry feminine energy that then bears down on men for the next 2,000 years, because we don't want to repeat what just happened on the planet the last 2,000 years. I want to work with women. I don't want to work for women. I don't want women working for me. I don't want to be anybody's slave. I want to collaborate, and I want a loving, balanced relationship with another partner, a woman who appreciates me and I appreciate her. But it started with healing the hatred and loving my daughters. Thank you.